Alright, hello everyone. Here we're back for a Golf Clash tutorial here, Tour 12. We're going to be talking about, tee box number 3 here today. And let's go over pretty much what we're looking at in terms of the shot. There's kind of, usually about 2 different lengths that people will have. They'll either have the sniper in this tour, or they'll have like a cat. Very few people are using Guardian, a couple. But the way that the line kind of sets up with the, is somewhere in the neighborhood of here, in between driver to wood, is pretty much right about there. So you're going to be needing to do 2 different shots on this hole. And I have, basically for all tailwinds and side winds, I have a wood shot that I use, and it doesn't matter. You really don't technically need the extra length for the shootouts. More than anything, if you're going to use cat, it's not going to be for the shootouts. It's going to be for the, the extra advantage to hopefully win the hole outright. So let's take a look at the shot at hand. First off, I just want to say, we can probably get away with a sniper 8 here, but I'm assuming in Tour 12 you'll probably have better than that. And your probably next best bet for this hole be hammer 6. And what's nice about Guardian is it develops, rather fast. Guardian 2 we can get away with. I'm going to go ahead and just write Guardian 4. I wouldn't imagine that it would even be possible for you to even get to this tour without having at least a Guardian 4. So I'll just go ahead and put that there. That's going to give you, just a little bit more flexibility anyway. You'll have a little bit more length on your club. And you basically just have to have cat unlocked. So, anybody using cat, even at a 1, they can potentially win this hole. So, never think that you're safe just because you might have somebody out clubbed. The difference between sniper 8 and cat 1, a little bit extra ball guide. You definitely have the advantage, but you still need to execute in order to actually beat those players. So let's take a look at the shot. First off, I try to land on the north half of this fairway, usually within a ring or 2. Usually I try to shoot for around 2 rings from the edge. And what I'll usually try to do is kind of crank the backspin up a little bit to be able to get it to land here, and then run out and actually stop around the hole. What you'll see, most people will make a mistake. They won't use enough backspin, especially in tail. So this is primarily a tailwind shot that we're basically talking about. So maybe they'll put the ball guide on the fairway, whereas I'm usually setting up my ball guide on the rough. So for this shot, and especially when we're talking about tailwinds, for instance, let's just, kind of give you a wind scenario here. So let's just kind of draw this wind in place. So the way that, this is the way you want your ball to go. So what I'll usually do here in terms of my shot setup, I'll usually kind of put the first bounce right around the rough edge here in this wind scenario, and then have, you won't be able to even see this ball guide, but let's just say, you could. Well, this is the way that I would typically set up my shot. I would offset it, probably about 2 grids in this case, and basically have this second bounce be right here, right before it actually reaches the fairway. That's because it's going to expand out in this tailwind. So if it's not a tailwind, I'm basically going to play the wind. If it's a side wind, I'll put it out to the side. But in the situation, and I just want to bring up this case because most guys are about 6 yards behind the hole, and they're very easy to beat. So I'm just kind of trying to help you understand as to how to kind of raise your game to the next level to be able to get this pin high and take shots from people. So let's take a look here. And side wind, headwind, tailwind. We're going to have to skip that headwind case. But for the side wind here, we're typically do, I kind of make my base. So what happens is you get to this last tee box here, and it's a little bit different than what, I think usually my baseline is kind of maybe 3 1/4 in Tour 7, for instance, or Tour 8, Tour 9. You'll usually see that I'll use kind of 3.25 as kind of my baseline. Well, this is, going to kind of upgrade a little bit. You need to start, when you get back a tee box extra, the ball carries more towards max club and it bounces harder. So since it's bouncing harder, you can almost go 3.5 for a side wind. You can definitely use 3.5 for a side wind, but you do have to land, relatively aggressive, like I'm saying, right around the 2 ring point. The guys who land shorter, that's typically what I'll see is guys, they'll try to play the center of the fairway and use 3 1/4, 3. They're just not going to be able to get the ball to stop. They would have to land literally on the rough edge on the other side, like right on it, which is very, very hard to do, to be able to get their ball to stop if they use the wrong amount of spin. So, what I'll usually do is somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 3.5 for the side wind. And let's just say, 3.75 to 4. This could be as much as 4. It really just depends on how high up it gets. And in certain situations, maybe towards 4.5 for a straight on headwind. And, you really have to take these with a grain of salt anyway, because there's a very good chance that you're going to get a 8 wind, and there's a very good chance you're going to get a 15 wind. So you can't play this spin for all those winds. I'm just basically kind of giving you the average case scenario. Let's say the wind's 10 miles per hour, which is what you're going to get most times with a Kingmaker ball, is you'll get somewhere around 10 miles per hour, and this will kind of apply for that case in this tailwind case that we're setting up here. And in terms of what I do for my adjustment, I'll usually go about max plus 30% for this shot. We're pretty much right at the max line here, and it carries over this water. It carries down kind of into a little bit of a little low valley. And because the ball will sometimes even carry beyond it with sniper, you might not, the line's probably not where it's showing. So with that being said, the lines usually it could be back towards the center a little bit more, which could make it, a little bit harder to set up originally with a power 3 ball. So, you might need to do a trick where you need to basically assume, okay, well, I've already gone, say, 2 rings, for instance, because I'm like right at max club, for instance. So that's something that I'll usually do. If this line is back here towards the center of this, and that's one of the reasons that Hammerhead 6, for instance, is actually going to be kind of a little bit better, because it's actually going to raise this line to kind of where I'm showing, like towards the top half of that fairway. That's kind of where you want it, so you can actually more easily set up. But since you're right at max, and it usually carries beyond max for this shot, usually a max plus 30 is relatively spot on. And similarly for this tailwind, you're going to have some variance. It won't always be minus 30, but let's just say, put it in between a window of 25 to 40, somewhere in there on this, 25 to 35, I would say, in terms of how much you'll need to do for that tailwind. If it's really small, and you move down into the sand, for instance, for the adjustment, you'll just have to pay attention. Like, is my adjustment down low in the bunker? And you may be able to get away with 25%. However, you might want to stick to this, 30 to 35 just to be on the safe side. And that's pretty much the only shot that I'll do. Now, aside from that, like I said, when I was drawing this blue line, I'm still going to do a slight offset in addition to this 30%. So you can't just, put it right dead center. You'll still have to play a little bit of an offset, at least probably, a green grid or two. But what the 30% does is it kind of, gets you back to your original land spot. It's a very good number to get you back to that original land spot that I, am accustomed to trying to pull off. So, that pretty much covers that shot here. So let's go ahead and start to talk about case 2 here, because we haven't even been able to talk about the woods yet. So the next woods that'll be, the most favorable will be Thorhammer 6 or 7 is going to be priority number 1, will be the best. Epoch 6 and 7, Epoch 5 will kind of be next, and then extra mile 7 or so will be kind of the next. And these two shots down here, this case down here, is very, very challenging. So let's talk about this one real quick. What you usually need to do, first off, it's kind of right at min. You might even have to, a ring or two, you might actually have to kind of guess, because you might not be able to set the target to here. So you might actually need to see kind of where it is. But what I'll usually do here, depending on how large it is, it's going to be somewhere to mid to max plus 10. And it really just depends on how the range of how strong it is and also the direction. For instance, you'll definitely have to kind of max it out if you get a wind that's kind of pointed this way, because you're going to need to curl it. That's another thing is for this shot, you typically have to curl it in all situations, at least for, a normal straight headwind. We'll probably use right around here for most cases. This is going to need to start to go out towards here, towards max, if you get this case right here where it's actually pointed right to left like this. And then alternatively, sometimes you'll get a wind that might come in down this way, where you might not need to use any at all, to where you could just kind of, just regularly do it. And, the scale of just how strong the wind is. If it's a 7, maybe I'll use a mid club. And there's a chance that you'll get it down to a 7. It could happen. And I'll just use kind of a mid club adjustment for that ring adjustment. However, if it goes, as high as, say, 15 miles per hour, then I'm going to have to go into max plus 10 for that shot. Now, let's start to talk about the next shot, which is just a tad bit easier. It's the Epoch 6, Epoch 7, of course, the Thor. Sometimes it depends on how large the wind is. What I'll usually try to do is land somewhere right around here, right center, and hop 2 lands right over this bunker, hop 3, and then it just kind of just gently rolls out. And this will usually kind of naturally happen, kind of perfectly with Epoch 6, Epoch 7. It's kind of 65 or so or 70, right around 6.5 backspin is going to be, relatively perfect in these cases. So let's just kind of draw in some cases here. 6 point, ideally I'd like to have maybe 7 here, but it's not necessarily something that you absolutely need. So for this shot right here, the Epoch shot, we're going to use, these are max numbers. So you can see that this case right here is a 7. However, you're not going to have 7, so you're just going to pretty much use max and just kind of hope for the best. It might roll through a little bit unless you land right on the back side of this bunker. I mean, you would almost have to land it in the sand to stop it in this case. But in these cases, you'll be able to stop it no matter what. So you can hit it real close to the hole with this, even with a puck. However, Thor's hammer makes it that much easier. So let's kind of, talk about that case, because what I can do with this is I can actually start to land just a little bit more north, which actually clears this bunker, and then just kind of, barely, you'll see that I'll be at least, 2 or 3 yards well beyond this bunker. There's way less risk involved because I'll be like on the green almost when it lands, as opposed to the Apocalypse, which has to kind of land on the fairway. I can basically land on the fringe or the green with the Thor's hammer. I can just crank this up. I can use more curl, and the same, similar type curl thing. You'll have to play the wind effect, because if you get an arrow that's pointed down this way, it'll kind of naturally do it without the curl. However, if you get the wind coming down this way, like this blue arrow over here, the opposite's going to happen. Is you're going to have to kind of max out. And additionally, the same type of thing with this adjustment, typically in this case, I'm going to always use max no matter what. There's pretty few exceptions. And I might go as much as, say, max plus 20 in this case. It's going to be in the air longer. You can see that it's much closer. It's landing much closer to mid club, to max club. But that extra time that it's in the air, because you're going to usually be pulling the target up towards max, you're probably going to need, well into max for these cases up here. So good luck with this hole, guys. The big key, though, is definitely going to be wind effect. So you've really got to master that concept, especially in this later tours. Those are going to be the guys winning time and time again, are the guys who visualize the shot better and pull off that perfect adjustment, not necessarily in terms of rings, but in terms of visualizing the way that the ball guide will change after the wind affects it. So good luck, and see you guys on the next hole here.